Can the Chiefs keep winning despite subpar performances deep into the playoffs? Well, they've done it again, somehow, despite looking like a team that just barely got out of bed. The Kansas City Chiefs have made their way to yet another AFC Championship game. I mean, at this point, they might as well start selling tickets to the Kansas City Chiefs AFC Championship Game, a tradition unlike any other event. Because, seriously, at this point it's a given. They've made it 7 years in a row. Folks, that's more consecutive appearances than some of us have been able to hold down a gym membership. But here's the thing. This year's Chiefs? They're not exactly setting the league on fire. In fact, they're kinda just hanging out, occasionally throwing a few sparks here and there. Yet, despite the lackluster performances, they somehow always find a way to win. Case in point, their 23-14 win over the Houston Texans in the AFC divisional round. Was it pretty? No. Was it ugly? Absolutely. But did it get the job done? You bet. The Chiefs' ugly but effective formula. Let's be real here. This wasn't exactly a game that had Chiefs fans high-fiving each other in joy. In fact, there were probably more groans than cheers. Especially when you look at Kansas City's offensive stats. According to True Media, their 37.7% success rate was one of their lowest of the season. In simple terms, the Chiefs' offense was more dysfunctional than trying to set up your new smart TV while your Wi-Fi password is password 123. And we can't blame all of that on the Texans' defense. Sure, Houston had a decent effort, led by Will Anderson Jr., who gave Patrick Mahomes a hard time with 2 sacks and 3 tackles for loss. The Chiefs' offensive line didn't exactly win any beauty contests either. And their offensive woes were magnified by a Texans defense that was as aggressive as a toddler with a new toy. But here's the thing. The Chiefs didn't need perfection. All they needed was Patrick Mahomes, a sprinkle of Travis Kelce magic, and a defense that, despite a few hiccups, was actually decent. And wouldn't you know it, they got exactly that. Mahomes and Kelce, the dynamic duo. This game felt like one of those old-school Batman episodes where Batman and Robin were just hanging out and everything seemed fine. Then, out of nowhere, a villain shows up, and they have to swoop in and save the day with one of those perfect, heroic moments. And those moments came courtesy of Mahomes and Kelce. Mahomes, as usual, did Mahomes things. In fact, it felt like we should have just had a "wait for it" sign above his head every time he touched the ball. The guy got hit, fell, and somehow managed to throw a game-winning touchdown to Travis Kelce. Kelce, who caught the ball like he was wearing a cape, made it look effortless. Cue applause. I mean, seriously, how many quarterbacks can throw a touchdown while being sacked and falling down at the same time? It's like Mahomes has this superpower that we all just take for granted at this point. And this wasn't a one-off moment either. Mahomes played the role of magician all night, with his usual clutch throws that made it seem like he was channeling some inner superhero vibes. If you're not a Chiefs fan, it's got to be frustrating watching him just casually escape what looks like a sure sack and then throw a touchdown while practically horizontal. But hey, that's what Mahomes does. Defensive help. When in doubt, sack him out. The defense also stepped up when it mattered most. The Chiefs' defense put on a show, recording 8 sacks against Texans quarterback C.J. Stroud. Let's just say it wasn't the most comfortable night for Stroud. In the fourth quarter, the Texans managed only 4 first downs and had a 28.6% success rate on offense. That's like trying to find your car keys in the dark while holding a cup of coffee. The Chiefs' defense wasn't perfect, but they did their job when the chips were down. And when you combine that with a few key plays from Mahomes and Kelce, it was enough to lock down a win. The Texans did get a touchdown and a field goal in the final quarter. But it didn't matter in the end. The Chiefs were just too efficient when it counted. But are they ready for the big dogs? Now, let's talk about what's coming next. The Baltimore Ravens or the Buffalo Bills. And folks, the Chiefs will need more than a sprinkle of Mahomes magic to get past these teams. The Ravens, led by Lamar Jackson, and the Bills with Josh Allen are coming in with offenses that are firing on all cylinders. The Chiefs can't rely on lucky bounces and random heroics in the next round. This game against the Texans left enough doubt in the air to make anyone wonder, can the Chiefs keep getting away with playing like this and still advance to the Super Bowl? Their sloppy performance against a relatively weak Texans team does leave you questioning how they'll fare against two of the most potent offenses in the NFL. Sure, Mahomes is great, but even he can't carry the team with a defense as leaky as a sieve and an offense that's out of sync. But can you really count out Mahomes? Let's be honest for a second, even though we're skeptical about their chances after that performance. Can we ever truly count out Patrick Mahomes? The guy is a human highlight reel. And we've seen him overcome far worse odds in his career. As long as Andy Reid is dialing up plays and Mahomes is under center, anything is possible. If they want to make it to a third consecutive Super Bowl, they'll have to find their rhythm. But let's not pretend they're out of it just because they had a bad game against the Texans. And who knows, maybe Mahomes will go full beast mode next week, throwing for 350 yards and 5 touchdowns just to prove me wrong and show us all how it's done. I mean, if you followed his career, that's not exactly out of the realm of possibility. Conclusion: a precarious road ahead, but still a road to the Super Bowl. So, can the Chiefs keep getting away with their less than perfect play? Well, maybe, but it's looking a little more precarious than it ever has before. They'll need more than just a few magical moments from Mahomes to get through the upcoming games. Against the Ravens or Bills, they're going to need to step up their game. But here's the thing. As long as Mahomes is on the field, there's always a chance for some magic. After all, he's made a career out of defying the odds. Now, I'm just going to sit back and wait for Mahomes to drop 350 yards and 5 TDs on whoever they face next, just to make me look like a genius for writing this. Chiefs' signature late magic, another AFC Championship, another year of frustrated fans. Let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. You know, the team that never seems to play their best game but somehow always ends up on top? Yeah, that one. The team that leaves fans of every other NFL franchise scratching their heads, questioning their own existence, and contemplating the meaning of fairness in sports. How do they do it? How do the Chiefs find a way to win even when they're playing like, well, let's just say they could have been better? In a thrilling divisional round game against the Houston Texans, the Chiefs did what they do best. They didn't panic. They didn't fold, and they didn't play perfect football. But they got it done. And oh boy, were we all watching a masterclass in late-game magic. With a 23-14 victory, Kansas City has now secured a spot in their 7th straight AFC Championship game. Yes, you read that right, 7. That's more consecutive appearances than a lot of teams can manage in a whole century. And speaking of legendary, Andy Reid, the man, the myth, the mustache legend, picked up career win number 300. Now, Reid joins the ranks of coaching legends like George Halas, Bill Belichick, and Don Shula. That's a big club, my friends. And it's exclusive, you know, much like Chiefs wins, rare for anyone else, but regular as the sun setting over Kansas City for this squad. But, let's get back to what's so perplexing about these Chiefs. No matter how the game is unfolding, even when it looks like they're hanging on by a thread, they always manage to pull it off. And boy, did the Texans look like they were about to be the team that broke the streak of, how are they winning this? But alas, Kansas City found a way. Again, Texans' rough start. You couldn't write a worse script. Let's talk about the Houston Texans, who, let's be honest, were trying to beat the Chiefs with a less than ideal start. Imagine trying to climb a mountain with a bag full of rocks. And you're wearing flip-flops. That was the Texans' opening act. On the very first play of the game, Houston gave up a 63-yard kickoff return. That's like giving up a head start in a race before you've even run a step. To make matters worse, cornerback Chris Boyd took a 15-yard penalty for throwing his helmet. Look, it was probably just frustration, but still, and actually shoved special teams coordinator Frank Ross. Now, I'm no expert, but that's a pretty rough start. Still, the Chiefs didn't capitalize as much as they could have. Sure, they put up a field goal from that big return, but they didn't really get the offense rolling yet. The Texans had a chance to make a statement, but instead of jumping on Kansas City's lackluster start, they stumbled themselves. Luckily for Houston, the Chiefs weren't exactly lighting the world on fire in those first couple of quarters either. But then, something magical happened. Travis Kelce, aka Mr. Reliable, got open and took a catch from Patrick Mahomes for a 49-yard gain. That was the spark the Chiefs needed. And, let's face it, this is what they do. They wait. They let the game play out just enough to give you a false sense of security before they pounce. After Kelce's massive play, Kareem Hunt capped it off with a touchdown, putting the Chiefs up 13-3. And suddenly, the Texans were chasing shadows. Chiefs keep winning with, what exactly? Okay, so here's the thing. The Chiefs weren't playing perfect football. In fact, they were pretty sluggish on offense. They only managed 123 total yards by halftime. And Kelce's big play accounted for nearly half of that. Not great, but what makes them so dangerous is that they don't need to dominate for 60 minutes. They've got the big play. And they've got Mahomes. Now, let's not forget the defense. The Chiefs' defense deserves its props for doing just enough to hold the Texans at bay in the first half. They weren't flashy, but they were effective. They bent but didn't break. And that's all you need when your offense finally wakes up. Fast forward to the second half. And here comes the Texans, marching down the field with a 15-play drive that lasted more than 10 minutes. They managed to cut the Chiefs' lead down to just 13-12 after a Joe Mixon touchdown. At that point, you could feel the tension. It was like waiting for a roller coaster to drop. But then, wait for it. A missed extra point from Houston's kicker Ka'imi Fairbairn. That one extra point could have made a difference. But instead, the Texans were left trailing by just 1 point. It's like they almost had it. But almost doesn't win games. Here's where the Chiefs show why they're Chiefs. The Chiefs didn't panic. In fact, they hardly looked worried at all. Then came a classic questionable call on a hit to Mahomes. Was it roughing the passer? Was it not? Who knows? But the Chiefs didn't need the sympathy. They got the touchdown anyway. Mahomes to Kelce for a touchdown made it 20-12. And that was essentially the death knell for Houston. After that, the Texans just made too many mistakes. A 4th and 10 sack, a bad punt, and a blocked field goal in the final minutes sealed the win for Kansas City. And just like that, it was over. The Texans could have been on the verge of an upset. But instead, they were sent home as spectators of yet another Chiefs postseason run. Kansas City advances to their 7th consecutive AFC Championship game. Seriously, this team never goes away. It's like that one friend who shows up to every party and never leaves, and somehow you end up having a good time with them anyway. What's next for the Chiefs? Kansas City now finds itself 2 wins away from making history. No team has ever won 3 consecutive Super Bowls. Could this be the year they rewrite the record books? Well, they've already got a 15-2 season under their belt. That's not too shabby, right? And while the rest of the NFL may cry foul and grumble about how the Chiefs do it, the how, the why, and the when, they just keep rolling on. It's like watching a band play a concert in the same venue every year. Yet somehow, they still get the crowd going wild. No matter what it looks like or how it feels. One thing's clear, in the Mahomes era, the Chiefs are always good enough to win the biggest games. And as long as that's true, get ready for another AFC Championship game. Whether you like it or not, the Chiefs are here to stay.